Coming up.
Dr. Chu was named on a Chinese patent, which was highly suspicious and had been flagged to CSIS by the head of the Winnipeg Lab as a potential national security threat. And so why in the world, with that knowledge, would PHAC transfer deadly, dangerous pathogens to Wuhan at the request of a scientist that PHAC knew at that time was a potential national security risk?
A question about non-Canadian citizens. The documents that we received revealed that non-Canadian citizens, specifically PRC nationals, were given access to the lab. So my first question is, who in public health, the Department of Health Canada, or in the Public Health Agency of Canada, who is responsible for granting security clearances at the NML in Winnipeg?
I'll go to Madam Chair.
Minister, back in 2017, Minister, the United States raised questions about the Chinese Ministry of Defense's Academy of Military and Medical Sciences Institute of Microbiology and Epidemiology, saying that they were a risk of potential biological weapon capabilities. Doesn't that fly in the face of you saying that we had a great relationship with China then?
That at that moment in time, thinking that that you would use information around therapies and vaccines to try to use them geopolitical military purpose, that was a different dimension.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Minister, 3 weeks ago when you appeared before the Health Committee and were asked about the massive national security breach at the Winnipeg Lab, you stated that PHAC at all material times acted in, quote-unquote, the highest order, and that with respect to accountability, no one at PHAC will be fired. Do you stand by that?
Well, in the first order, these two employees were fired. They were held to account for their actions and for the lies that they told. But I believe, as I stated then, I will state now, that the Public Health Agency acted appropriately throughout that process in responding to those lies and that misinformation.
Thank you, and no one else will be fired, correct?
I am not aware of anybody else being fired. The people who are responsible for engaging in that activity have been
So I want
fired.
to ask you some questions about decisions that PHAC made surrounding this massive national security failure, and Canadians can judge themselves whether PHAC acted in the highest order, as you stated 3 weeks ago before the Health Committee. First, why in October 2018 did PHAC enter into a material transfer agreement with the Wuhan Institute of Virology to transfer from the Winnipeg Lab Ebola and HEPA, two of the most deadly pathogens? Why did that happen?
Well, in 2018, we were working collaboratively with China on developing therapies and interventions with respect to Ebola. It is a serious global pathogen, and that the efforts at that point in time were to collaborate with China in a partnership to take action with respect to Ebola.
Minister, I asked you a question. I'm going to build on it. October 2018 is significant. This material transfer agreement was initiated by none other than Dr. Chu, one of the two scientists. In October 2018, at the time that that material transfer agreement was entered into, PHAC was already aware that Dr. Chu was named on a Chinese patent, which was highly suspicious and had been flagged to CSIS by the head of the Winnipeg Lab as a potential national security threat. And so why in the world, with that knowledge, would PHAC transfer deadly, dangerous pathogens to Wuhan at the request of a scientist that PHAC knew at that time was a potential national security risk?
Well, in the fall, as you know, in the fall of 2018 is when this matter was first flagged as concern, and we have due process. The transfer that you're talking about was done in the full knowledge and with the full cooperation of the Public Health Agency in the interest of advancing the protection of our species against the infectious disease of Ebola. And at that point in time, the effort, because Ebola doesn't know boundaries, the effort was to work collaboratively with China and other countries. It is deeply disturbing, obviously.
Chair, point of order. This is the third time now that Mr. Cooper has interrupted the minister who's here as a witness. I think he's answering in good faith. I think that Mr. Cooper is asking questions, which he's perfectly entitled to. I would just ask, Mr. Chair, that the usual, the typical, the collegial back and forth that we would expect here at committee be allowed to take place rather than interruptions, because I'm trying to get a sense of the answers as well, and interruptions get in the way of that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Fragasatos. I think that Minister Holland, you should do your best to keep your answers concise, given that there is limited time for questions. Mr. Cooper, allow the minister to complete his answers. Go ahead. And we've stopped the clock, so
okay.
You're good to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, you are right that it was in the fall of 2018 that red flags were first raised about these two scientists. And a preliminary investigation wasn't undertaken until December of 2018. That's months after the first red flags were raised. And in the interim, a material transfer agreement was signed with Wuhan at the request of one of those scientists who was deemed to be a potential national security threat. Why did it take so long to launch a preliminary investigation? 4 months? That's a long time.
Yeah, so in this instance, the nature of that patent and the reason why that patent hadn't been disclosed was being investigated, and there is due process. I would say that it is indeed sad for the world that we are no longer able to cooperate closely with countries with respect to deadly pathogens that represent a clear and present threat to the human race. The fact that there are countries that are engaging in activities that would endanger not only our country, but all human beings, is profoundly disturbing.
Minister, and then the report, a preliminary fact-finding report, is issued on March 23rd, 2019, that identified that the two scientists had engaged in multiple security and intellectual property breaches, and that they had engaged in unauthorized transfers, including to Wuhan, and had engaged in unauthorized research collaboration with the Beijing regime, including the People's Liberation Army. And what did PHAC do next? PHAC actually then transferred Ebola and Hennepin to Wuhan.
Well, you're making a connection between two completely separate things. In the first order, the transferring and working with China at that point in time to try to protect our species from Ebola was something that we were doing earnestly with the belief that China shared our desire to protect human beings from a deadly pathogen. In the second order, when you're talking about the individuals, the scientists who were fired, remember, these were individuals who were hired in 2003 and 2006. They are published throughout North America. They are eminent scientists. They are Canadians. They are Canadian citizens.
And not only that,
Sir, if I could finish, Mr. Chair, if I could be given the floor to the, I think it's a key point.
But it took another 3.5 months until July 5th, 2019, before the two scientists were finally marched out of the Winnipeg Labs. Scientists that by March had been identified as working with the People's Liberation Army. This is Canada's highest security lab. Is that really an instance of PHAC acting on the highest order, as you said? Is that Mark Holland's definition of PHAC acting on the highest order?
Mr. Cooper, you are over time, but I will give the minister an opportunity to respond.
Due process is incredibly important, Mr. Chairman. These individuals had worked with the Public Health Agency. One was hired in 2003, one was hired in 2006. They were published and renowned across North America for their work in vaccines, virology, and in therapy. They were seen as being leaders in helping to save lives. If you are making an accusation against somebody and these people's careers rightfully are destroyed, before you destroy somebody's career, they are entitled to due process.
Minister,
due process is important in this country.
Mr. Cooper, I'm sorry, your time has expired.
The identification of two patents registered in China, was that the first red flag that went up about Dr. Chu?
That's correct.
And can you tell us why Dr. Matthew Gilmore suddenly resigned 8 weeks into a global pandemic in May of 2020, and why Tina Nemianovsky, the president of the Public Health Agency of Canada, suddenly resigned on a Friday afternoon of September 2020?
I don't know that I'm in a position to be able to comment on that. Madam Jeffries?
I would say that both of those, it's not really appropriate for us to comment, and I think they both reflected they resigned for personal reasons, not
Okay, so
associated, not associated with this issue.
Not associated with this issue at all. Okay.
I'm not privy to their reasons, but that was what
You know that they resigned for personal reasons. That's what you're
Perhaps
telling.
if I could respond. I mean, I think one of the challenges, and I got into it earlier, anytime we're talking about information with respect to
I know what you're
an
gonna say,
employee, we have to be very, very
With respect,
careful.
you are wrong in that. The Privacy Act exempts parliamentary committees and other judicial proceedings from the terms of the Privacy Act. That's stated in the opening clauses of that act, which is an act of parliament. So we are exempt from the provisions of the Privacy Act when we're asking questions in respect of employees of the Government of Canada. We went through that in the previous parliament on this very committee, actually, when we were asking for these documents. But if you don't know the reasons why they resigned, that's fine. I'm just asking the questions. So I take it that
Madam
you don't.
Jeffrey responded to the fullest extent
Okay,
that I can
thank you.
provide her an answer.
Thank you. The next question I have is there any collaboration between the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg and entities in the PRC presently?
No.
Okay. Are there any scientists working for the Government of Canada that are participating in the 1,000 Talents program?
I would refer to Madam Jeffrey to make sure that I'm not.
So in this case is the only one that I'm aware of where our scientists are participating in this program, and I'd refer you to our security services for information. This was an undeclared collaboration.
That's right, and as you're correct, the Government of Canada stumbled upon it. Has there been a review or a proactive request on part of the management within the Government of Canada to ensure that all government scientists are complying with the policies of the government and declaring their participation in the 1,000 Talents program?
Yeah, I mean, look, there had to be, and I think it's deeply unfortunate. You have, again, these are Canadian citizens, longtime employees, well-published, eminent scientists, known well throughout North America, lying to the Public Health Agency. That changed things materially. And so there was so at that point in time, you're now having to ask questions and dig into people's backgrounds in a way that would have been seen as invasive and inappropriate before.
Sure. So just to clarify, there is no collaboration presently going on between the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg and entities and individuals in the People's Republic of China. Is that?
That is correct. And I would say, yeah, and I would say just up further to the other point, there's a requirement, and there always has been a requirement to declare any affiliations or outside work.
Agreed.
And I mean, that's one of the reasons these people were fired. They lied about that.
Agreed. Thank you. A question about non-Canadian citizens. The documents that we received revealed that non-Canadian citizens, specifically PRC nationals, were given access to the lab. So my first question is, who in public health, the Department of Health Canada, or in the Public Health Agency of Canada, who is responsible for granting security clearances at the NML in Winnipeg?
I'll go to Madam Jeffrey.
So the security screening process begins with reliability status checks that are conducted by the security department of the agency, then referred to the RCMP and to the Security Intelligence Service for secret clearances.
But CSIS doesn't grant clearance. CSIS and the RCMP and others provide advice, but there is an individual within either Health Canada or PIAC that grants the clearance. Who is that individual?
It's granted by the security department of the Public Health Agency.
So departmental security officer or some similar titled person. So why did they grant access to PRC nationals for a level 4 lab, which is contrary to government policy?
I think that the engagement, and could be correct. Go ahead, Madam Chair. Yeah.
I can say that the access of those students was through a research affiliate program with the University of Manitoba, and that that those students did not have clearances under the Human Pathogens and Toxin Act, and therefore were not involved in level 3 or level 4 lab work or any of the restricted
They required
pathogens and toxins.
top-level clearance to get into the lab.
Mr. Chong,
And
I'm sorry, your
presumably-
time has
Yes, they
expired.
required a security
Yeah, and just one final quick point on this. It wasn't just students.
Very quickly.
A senior technician at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a PRC national, was also granted access to that lab, the NML lab. That was also contained in the documents. Identified as individual number 2 in the documents. So again, somebody in the department, not the 2 scientists in question, because they're not granting security clearance for their own lab. Somebody else in the department granted them security clearance, and my question is, why are they not being held responsible for that gross negligence in protecting our security?
Some Canadian Chinese scientists feel uneasy, targeted, or that their careers could be limited due to having a Chinese name. They are worried about being under a cloud of suspicion. How do you balance national interest of security with the concerns of some in the Chinese community?
Well, I thank you very much for that question. I think it's an important one. It's important to distinguish the action of an individual versus making collective statements. And so in this instance, these were 2 Canadian citizens who engaged in reprehensible actions that are reflective on them and only them. And I think we have to be very careful when we're talking about scientists or we're talking about any individual to ascribe anything other than to the people who are responsible for taking those actions. And I think it is in this geopolitical environment, it's very difficult with tensions being where they are with China to separate out the actions of the government of China versus citizens of Canada who happen to have Chinese ancestry, or for that matter, people living within China. You know, there are unbelievable numbers of wonderful Chinese scientists doing incredible work for the betterment of humanity.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Minister. You know, back in 2017, Minister, the United States raised questions about the Chinese Ministry of Defense's Academy of Military and Medical Sciences Institute of Microbiology and Epidemiology, saying that they were a risk of potential biological weapon capabilities. Doesn't that fly in the face of you saying that we had a great relationship with China then?
I don't recall having said we had a great relationship. I said that there were, at that point in time, emergent concerns, certainly around the way in which China was engaging itself internationally. There were some early warning signals that things were beginning to turn in a bad way. But I would say that the management of risk, in particular when we're talking about deadly pathogens and trying to find answers, that at that moment in time, thinking that that you would use information around therapies and vaccines to try to use them geopolitical military purpose, that was a different dimension at that moment in time.
But realistically, Minister, I mean, clearly the United States identified that they were talking about small-scale offensive biological weapons program.
Well,
So
at that moment in
you
time,
think about it, you've talked a lot about Ebola. Wouldn't you use Ebola to do that? Wouldn't that be a great pathogen to do it?
well, no, actually, what I would say is that the
No, it wouldn't.
international
Is that what you're
cooperation.
saying?
You're not letting me finish my sentence. What
You're
I'm
not
saying
answering
is
the
that.
question.
What I'm attempting to answer. So what I'm saying is that international collaboration at that moment in time with respect to Ebola and any number of other pathogens that was happening at an international stage, but China represents 1 billion people. It has an enormous wealth of knowledge and
I
information.
don't know about China.
And
My question
but
is
they
really
were,
related. Don't you think
we
that this
wanted
is
them to be part of
dangerous?
that solution.
Don't you think that's dangerous?
I think it's dangerous to give up on collaboration with 1 billion people. Unfortunately, we had to do that
So
because the
even
threat
though we have
environment
scientists
evolved.
sending a potentially weaponized virus to a power that's going to make biological weapons, clearly, you think that's
Ebola,
okay? So
no,
that's
I
okay
think
with
Ebola exists today as a deadly pathogen.
you. Is that okay with you, or is it not?
Ebola exists and is easily found in there's
Well, you know what?
outbreaks all
No,
over
that's
the world.
not true, Minister, because
Well,
you
there
know
are
what?
outbreaks all over
They
the
did- they
world,
didn't
and
have
China's
Excuse me.
objective was to.
Excuse me.
Well, I
They did
don't know
not
if you want me to
have-
answer or not. I
At the
guess that's up
Wuhan
to you.
Institute of Virology, they didn't have Ebola until the scientists at the National Microbiology Lab sent it to them.
There are regular
They did not have
outbreaks.
it.
There have been regular outbreaks over the last 20 years of Ebola.
Did they have it in Wuhan before it was sent from Canada or not?
What I would say is
Simple
this, which
question.
is that Ebola exists today. It has
Minister,
existed for decades
yeah,
as a deadly pathogen.
I didn't ask you
and
for
it doesn't
a
need to be
lecture on-
weaponized.
I didn't ask
it
you for a
already
lecture
is.
on
Point of
Ebola.
orders.
Ebola.
Chair,
Yes, Mr. Maltby.
I think this committee was going so well. And there were some very thoughtful back and forth that was taking place from members from all parties. and all of a sudden I'm seeing a behavior that I saw from Mr. Ellis in HESA committee, which is highly inappropriate. And I think it's undervaluing the work that this committee is doing this on a very important topic. Pose a question, wait for the answer, get the answer. You may not like the answer, but at least have an opportunity to have a respectful discussion between the member and the speaker. And I
didn't ask for a lecture on Ebola. Thanks.
Yes, I think.
Thank you for interrupting. I mean, this is just Mr. Ellis just made my point by even interrupting another member on a point of order. I mean, you come with a certain attitude, or you here to make sure that there is respectful conversation happening, as was being done by other members from his own party and other members from of the committee.
Perhaps I could just in 10 seconds, Mr. Chair, to respond, because I just have a 10-second runway to answer the question.
Well, no, we've stopped the clock because I want Dr. Ellis to have his full 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. I appreciate that. So,
no,
I guess
Dr.
the
Ellis,
question...
if I could please, again, this is just in the interest of our interpreters that when we talk over each other, it makes things very difficult for them. And so I would ask, in respect of them, that we keep things, orderly.
Yeah, maybe if the minister would answer the question. So we'll move on from there. I guess that's the question that we'll leave. Are there other 1,000 Talents program scientists working in other Canadian labs run by the Canadian government?
None that we are aware of, no. And I can say that with respect to, there's no
Minister.
weaponization.
No, I appreciate that answer.
Well, to the other one, if I could say,
Chair,
there's no evidence of weaponization.
Are we going to have this guy answer the question? I mean, once he does, then he doesn't need to keep talking. He answered the question.
I was attempting to answer the question. I didn't get a chance to answer before because you're interrupting me.
Then have you done an extensive investigation to understand, are there other 10,000 Talents program
That would not be
scientists?
conducted by me. I would refer you to intelligence officials in terms of what
So is
actions
that
they've taken. And
investigation ongoing?
my understanding is that those officials are going to be before this committee, and there'll be an
Is the investigation ongoing now at the
opportunity.
current time, Minister?
I'm not responsible for that investigation. It wouldn't be me or my
I
department.
didn't
but
ask
those,
if you're responsible. I asked you if there's an investigation
I would say
going
that
on.
those individuals will be
Yes,
appearing before
Mr.
this committee, and you can ask the questions of them. And if you want to listen to them or give them an opportunity
No,
to have
I'm
an
asking
answer,
you a
then
question. So
Dr.
is
you're
it-
not really
Sorry,
asking
we
me a
have a
question.
point of order.
You're badgering me, but that's okay.
I'm sorry to hurt your
Dr. Ellis.
feelings.
You're not hurting my
Please.
feelings. You're just not letting me get a chance to answer.
You're not answering the question. That's the biggest
Dr.
problem.
Ellis, please.
Chair, I echo what Mr. Nakvi said. The meeting was going well. These are important issues. No one's denying that. But if we're going to be serious about getting answers that allow for a genuine approach, one that prevents errors like this from happening in the future, then at least allow a civil dialogue to take place. That's all we're asking for. We're going to have a number of meetings on this very issue, it looks like. And so I don't know if Mr. Ellis is here as a permanent replacement. I don't know if he's here temporarily. But I would just ask for the member to act as an adult. I don't know how else I can put it.
All right, I think, listen, we've made our points. Let's keep things cut, neat, tidy, short questions, short answers. Get it done, okay? Dr. Ellis, you have just a tad over a minute left.
Thanks very much, Chair. So, considering the what we've learned so far, which is next to nothing, what prompted the SDG of the NML to ID Drs. Chu and Cheng as potential security risk as far back as 2018?
Well, as Madam Jeffrey had indicated, there was a process where there was an update that there was from CSIS on the potential of employees being approached or being attempted to get information from them and to undertake reviews. And as part of that review that came out of that process in the fall of 2018, it was found that there was a patent that had been...
Excuse me, Minister, that's not true. Because the patent issue we already established came in October. This was in August of 2018. The SDG said to CSIS, there's a problem with two scientists. They named Chu and Cheng. Why?
Well, again, my understanding of the chronology, and Madam Jeffrey can correct me if I'm wrong, but in August of 2018 is when there was a CSIS briefing.
Yeah, but
it
you're
was
not
in
answering the
September.
question,
It was in
Minister.
December
Excuse me,
of. It was in September of 2018 when the patent was discovered.
All right.
Yeah, that's not what I asked
We're
you,
out
though,
of time.
Minister.
I'm sorry.